Hello, everyone. Welcome to our new episode. This is Rethink Life, and we have a brand new episode today. Before we get started, I do want to acknowledge that we are sponsored by the Institute of Metaphysical Science. Established in 1959 as the Margaret Laird Foundation, researching, exploring, living, and teaching the science of being and the causal nature of consciousness. You can see our website at www.scientificmetaphysics.org. Today, I am so excited because we are going to be discussing personal concept. And this is what is really cool about this. This was written by Margaret Laird in the 30s. Okay? And, but here's the thing. So even back in 69, in the introductory deal, when this was published into this kind of a format, because it was delivered as an address. The ideas she expresses, which were possibly thought of as revolutionary back in the 30s, are now pretty much in line with current unfoldment in many fields of thought and research. For instance, one of the things that Margaret Laird says, if life is to be lived without suffering, one must learn to evaluate every experience as good, since the good and evil of what is called human experience is point of view. So anyway, so I just want to give you a little background and introduction to Margaret Laird. We don't do that very often. But the fundamental idea of oneness is consistently maintained and developed throughout this pamphlet. In fact, throughout all of Margaret Laird's writings and Betty's writings, and as well as Mary Baker Eddy's writings. But emphasizing man's ability to live his humanity as his divinity. The ideas are practical and demonstrable. Mrs. Laird is a pioneer in this research work and dedicated her life to the practice of metaphysical science, which she defined as living life itself as a discernment of spiritual facts. So this is all in this address. So what we're going to do is the next 3 episodes will be, this episode and the next 2 will be on looking at some of the initial ideas in this pamphlet, give you a flavor of that and really dive into it. Again, that's the personal concept. So I'm going to start us off with a quote right at the beginning of the personal concept. Is a quote from Lord Byron, the poet, that says, "The mind can make substance and people planets of its own, with beings brighter than have been, and give a breadth to forms that can outlive all flesh." So welcome, Betty. Welcome to the episode.
Thank you.
All right. So do you want to give us any sort of introduction into what personal concept and anything like that before we dive into all the different quotes we're going to be exploring?
Yeah, I was pleased that we decided to start with this little address because fundamentally, unless you have some idea of the terminology that Mrs. Laird uses, everything becomes very difficult to figure out. But when you start with the personal concept and recognize what it is and what she sees as the definition of individual being, then you've got kind of the leverage to dig in and see what she's saying. You know, if we live ourselves as the personal concept, the view that we have a whole different life than if we see that that view is really just a temporary perception of a reality that we're not really seeing clearly.
Mm-hmm.
Then it makes a difference when you understand what's actually present as reality and you rely less and less on your view for information.
Yeah.
That's kind of summing up what we're getting at here.
Yeah, very good. And we've titled this episode, Man, the Function of the God Idea.
Yep.
So that's the title of this episode. So what I'd like to say is if you have any comments, anything you'd like to contribute, go ahead and type those into your comments box, either on Facebook or on YouTube, and we will get them here. They'll be a little bit delayed, but go ahead and do that. We love the participation. And also, if you're enjoying this conversation, we love the thumbs up or the like. and that sort of thing, both in YouTube and Facebook. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel, I invite you to subscribe to that as well.
Okay.
All right, so let's jump in. So we start with personal concept on page 2, where Mrs. Laird says, if mind is not substance, form, and tangibility, God is substanceless, for the substance of spirit is divine mind.
Yeah. And that's right in the very beginning of this little pamphlet, this address, because it pinpoints exactly what she's talking about. You know, the fundamental key in Christian Science and in metaphysical science is that all is infinite mind. So she wanted to make it clear that mind, with a capital M, is another word, or a synonym, if you will, for the God idea. So she's not talking about brain action. She's talking about a universal intelligence, and we call it mind.
Mm-hmm.
So fundamentally, being itself being, is mind functioning, looking like man. So, yeah.
Yeah, and she has, at the very beginning, she defines idea, concept, and human right there on page 2 as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, in a nutshell, idea is synonymous with awareness.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it's your mental perception, your conscious awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And then the concept really is the belief you've got about it. Like I look in the mirror and I see this gray-haired lady or white-haired lady or whatever, and I think, oh, that's me. Nope, that's what I look like. But that's not me.
It's the
That's
concept
the
of you.
stand-in. You know, that's the concept, the belief I've got about myself.
Right.
But who I am, which has that thing occur called Betty, is mind action. It's the action of the God idea. And individualized, I call it Betty.
Mm-hmm.
But if I believe that the Betty is the center and circumference of all of my being, I'm very limited.
Right.
And when something happens to that thing I call Betty, I'm in deep trouble.
Right.
But when I recognize that that view really does not affect who I am, but who I am has a view show up better.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that's mind-boggling, but it's a huge insight for you to have dealing with a problem that occurs. Because when something comes up that upsets you, you look and say, well, why am I being upset? I'm upset because my view looked disturbing. And I believe that the way it looks is the way it is. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Yeah.
All I have in a view is something that says I consciously exist. I know it because I can look around and see all kinds of stuff.
Right.
But the way it looks is never the way it is. It's
Right.
just a view. It happens to be the best view I've got at the moment, but it changes every day because every day I find myself better informed or thinking in a different way or at a different level. And when that happens, the view shifts.
But it shifts moment by moment. It doesn't even take 24 hours.
All the time, quicker than the snap of a
Right.
finger.
So it's not just day. But then she goes on to say what I think is what the definition of human, or would this also be the definition of man, a term used for life itself, capital L, as it appears on this belief level. Life is
really
living.
the human being.
That's human being.
As it appears on this belief level.
Okay, got it.
So it's the Betty. It's the Kim.
Okay.
It's the belief level.
But it says here, the term human is often used as if it meant an illusory existence. And then she goes on to, I know, but she goes on to say if it did, there would be no progress. I can't get that page turned.
For the human race.
Yeah, for there'd be no progress for the human race. So so then she goes on to say, giving up personal sense, human existence is identified with mind as conscious identity.
Yeah, and you know how that synchronizes in your everyday living. It's when I give up believing that Betty has anything to do with the quality of my life,
Yeah,
and I'm willing to just let Betty be a picture, like hanging on the wall or whatever.
yeah,
Not responsible for anything, not making a difference, just Betty.
yeah,
When I give that personal sense of myself up, the human living that I see every day,
yeah,
it smooths out, problems are solved, answers are received, solutions appear,
yeah,
on I go.
right.
But if I blame Betty for all that, I'm in deep trouble because
Yeah,
Betty doesn't have the capacity. Betty's just a view, doesn't have the capacity to do anything. But the being that I am does it all. And
right.
it shows up looking like Betty doing stuff.
Yeah, very good. I
That
like that.
double talk?
No, I hear you. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes you gotta just really, it's simple yet complicated.
Yep. Very simple
Yeah,
and difficult to say.
exactly. So then if we look at, so how did Mary Baker Eddy say this in Science and Health? Same idea. How did it get said there? And we turn to page 118, lines 13 to 15. And there's a typo in that because it should be 13 to 15, not 13 to 151. But in their spiritual significance, science, theology, and medicine are means of divine thought, which includes spiritual laws emanating from the invisible and infinite power and grace.
Yep.
So I want to go back to personal concept. If mind is not substance, form, and tangibility, God is substanceless, for the substance of spirit is divine mind.
Yep.
And then I'm looking for how that says it over here. And this seems so much more complicated. So in their spiritual significance, science, theology, and medicine are means of divine thought, which include spiritual laws emanating from the invisible and infinite power and grace.
Yeah.
So
And
everything comes from being.
yeah. And it's important to see that this thing we called human living, science, theology, all the religious stuff, medicine, all the stuff that shows up to help you when you're in trouble.
Yeah.
We think of, there's been this schism or whatever. People thought they couldn't delve into that because it wasn't spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it is. It is being whole, perfect, complete, seen in the clearest language I have.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, living right now, showing up as Betty, science is very important. Theology has been very important.
Yeah.
And medicine is anything I do in my own behalf, taking care of whatever shows up. But as I walk along, acknowledging the presence, the being that has Betty show up,
Mm-hmm.
the science, theology, and medicine, the language world I walk through, shapes right up and answers every question I've got.
Yeah.
So it isn't something to be denied. It's something to be seen for what it is, an idea in operation in a form I understand.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. Got that. All right. Now, if we look at what is in your book, Mind is the Athlete, how you express that same idea on page 74, where you say being self-expresses in and as form, action, and any sensory perception, which are referred to herein as language.
Yep.
So that's the being showing up in language. That's what you have in your book as a metaphysical map.
Yep.
It's the language piece.
Yep.
Okay.
What do you mean? The personal concept is the language
Yeah.
view? Yes. Okay.
It's the language piece of that metaphysical map that you outline in your book.
Yep.
Okay, very good. Anything more on that you would like to say?
No, I think we've said enough on that.
Okay.
Unless somebody has a question.
Well, I don't see any yet. So if anyone has any questions, just type them into the box there and we will get to them if you are live. All right. So personal concept on page 3, Mrs. Laird wrote, this discovery of the physical scientist leads thought to the discernment of the fact that the correct or scientific view of substance identifies it with mind as spiritual energy or thought force.
Yeah. You got to remember, I've said this before in other sessions that we've had, but physicists have already proven that until there is an observer, there's nothing to observe.
Mm-hmm.
So I make the world I walk through, and the world I walk through makes me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, literally.
All right. And then if we look at that same idea expressed in Science and Health by Mary Baker Eddy on page 400, line 12, Mrs. Eddy wrote, eradicate the image of disease from the perturbed thought before it has taken tangible shape in conscious thought, alias the body, and you prevent the development of the disease.
Exactly.
No.
All is infinite mind.
Right.
If you live yourself mentally accurately, the disease goes.
Right. So when she says eradicate the image of the disease from perturbed thought.
Mm-hmm. You can't, of course.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. It's like, well, what's that? Isn't that getting at what people think they need to deny something?
Thank you for bringing that up. That gets you caught up in the belief system going on. So the way to do that is actually to acknowledge the fact of being. If God being is all that's going on, then I don't have to buy into poor Betty. She's gotten herself in a problem here. We're going to have to do something about that. You know, once you've bought that one, you're going to trot down the primrose path of figuring out what to do about that problem, and suffering or science, one way or the other, you'll work it all out. But it's painless when you understand that who you are doesn't ever trot that path.
Right. So when you look at this whole notion of eradicate the image of disease from the perturbed thought, that whole sentence right there, all it is be willing and allow it to be.
Yeah, leave it alone.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Allow it to
facts.
be. Yeah, allow it to be, leave it alone and acknowledge the facts.
Right. You know,
The facts of being.
I remember many times, you know, I've heard, well, that may be the way it looks, you know, I've got a headache, something like that may be the way it looks. Now, what's the way it is? So there's the concept.
Uh-huh.
And then what's the way it is? Does the being that exists, calling itself Betty, have a headache? No. So where's the headache?
Yeah.
You know, it's everything is as real as you make it and no more so. Mrs. Eddy said that.
Right. And that also goes back to the story when you didn't feel well and your mama said you don't have to take that to the corner.
Yeah. You don't have to take that all the way to school with you.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah.
All right. And then in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 76, how you say that whole idea is everything that shows up in your world is perfection functioning, giving you an access to yourself the only way you can see it at that moment.
Yeah.
And that's exactly right. It's all self-discovering. And when you can allow things to be and acknowledge the facts of being, you actually have a lot of peace and calm, where otherwise there could be anxiety, worry, stress, you know, all of that stuff showing up.
Yep. And it's like a crucible. It's very tempting when you're in a tight spot to buy that there's a problem here.
Yeah.
It's a discipline to say, wait a minute, that may be the way it looks. Now, what's the way that it is?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of times it's easier to go follow that thought of complaining because there's so much buy-in in the world around us.
Sure.
So
24/7.
right. But doing that, you sort of, box yourself in also.
Well, I'll tell you the thing about it, though. Every time you show yourself the power that you have when you acknowledge the facts of being, become stronger and stronger. And it becomes like a snap of a finger to say, that's the way it looks. What's the way it is? And
Yeah.
on you go.
Right.
Until you prove it to yourself, you think, oh dear, I don't know. I have to do something.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. All right. There being no comments brought forth yet, we're going to go on to our next quote.
We've got a brilliant audience because they all understand all this stuff.
That's right. That's right. All right. On personal concept on page 4, Margaret Laird wrote, your very existence means that you include every aspect of existence, since the living of life, capital L, is what you are.
Yep. And capital L, life, is another synonym for the God idea.
Yes.
The living of the God idea is what you are. The action of the God idea is man.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yep.
And Mary Baker Eddy in Science and Health, page 81, line 28, says, in science, man's immortality depends upon that of God, good, and follows as a necessary consequence of the immortality of good.
Yep. It isn't that man has any capacity to have anything. Man is the action of the God idea. The having and the doing and the being is the God idea.
Mm-hmm.
Man doesn't do any of that, but lives free as a breeze as the God idea in action.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one being. Margaret makes a great point of that in her classes too. God, man is one being, seen as God idea in action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
One thing going on.
Yeah, very good. All right. And then in your book, Mind is the Athlete, on page 77, you say it this way. Okay. Who you are being, as being, capital B, is the cause and condition of your language world every instant.
Yeah, you are the world you walk through. You make it as you go, and it makes you as you go.
Right.
Yeah.
So look to being.
By my being, all being is.
Yeah.
Quoting Bicknell Young.
Right. So if you end up having a lot of judgments and everything else and thoughts, or you think you got to force something, or oh my God, oh dear, it's going to be, is that the suffering versus the science?
Yeah, and I'll tell you another booby trap that is very tempting. You can be very smug about being home free, as it were.
Right.
No problems, everything's working out beautifully. And then something occurs for your neighbor or your daughter or your friend down the street. Right. And you think, thank God that's not me. Guess what you've just done to yourself?
Yeah, it's you.
I am the world I walk through.
That's right.
So I want to be alert to staying with the being that has it all occur, rather than the picture that shows me how it could look.
Right. Yeah, we do have a comment by Sandy Jackson. When the know-how evolves, as it surely will, it will prove the mental nature of being.
Really nice. Thank you.
So, yeah. All right. So now, let's see.
And Sandy will be coming to that idea too as we go through personal concept. We aren't going to go all the way through, but we're going to do the beginning part.
Right.
So we may come across that.
All right.
Very nice.
All right. And then, oh, that's the one we were on. So anything else that you want to say, any other questions? Because that's pretty much all the quotes we had pulled together. So that's it. And I will say that if you want to check out any of the writings or order the personal concept for yourself, it's available out at our website at the Institute of Metaphysical Science, scientificmetaphysics.org, if you would like to do that. We also have, for those of you who might have been interested in the Lens of Awareness live cast that Betty just got done giving a couple of weeks ago, the MP3s for that are also available out here, and you can go and order those. They're available as MP3s, so you can just download it if you would like to listen to that. Those are available now.
Thank you. I didn't know they were out yet.
Yes, I know, right? Right when you think it's going to take forever, it doesn't. All right. So then I guess there being no more conversation, we are going to wrap it up for today. And we will be here next week.
With
Starting at, huh?
With another section on personal concept.
That's right, with another section on personal concept, and that one is called, it has a cool title, Mom. What is it? I just closed the file, darn it. Okay, hang on a minute, you guys, hang on.
Being yourself versus being personal.
There you go. Being yourself versus being personal. What's the difference? Sometimes we think we're just being ourselves, but are we? Or are we being personal? We're going to explore that next week. So we'll see you 7 o'clock Wednesday night, Central Time, 5 p.m. Pacific Time. And until then, have a great week and notice and start to see what's driving the show. All right. Until then.